This is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu. Embassy Suites by Hilton Charleston, an all-suite hotel and conference center minutes from Yeager Airport and Capital Markets. Reservations and brasserie dining information available at hilton.com.
Solar Holler, supporting Appalachian communities and building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar energy and battery backup to homeowners, nonprofits, and businesses throughout the region. More at solarholler.com.
Welcome to the Legislature Today. I'm Brianna Heaney. The Senate passed two energy-related bills Monday. Senate Bill 627 would allow the storage of carbon dioxide deep in wells under state parks. No drilling or pipeline construction would take place in state parks, supporters said. It passed 29-3 and now heads to the House. Senate Bill 612 would give lawmakers more oversight of the West Virginia Public Service Commission. Public anger has built in recent months over the rising cost of electricity in the state. The PSC approves those increases. It passed 30-3 and now heads to the House. The House of Delegates passed 5 bills today over to the Senate. One bill that addressed thrift stores garnered some debate.
The Truth in Giving Act deals with thrift shops or companies that repurpose old donated items. The bill requires for-profit thrift retailers to provide a notice to the public that they are a for-profit company. The bill was sponsored by Delegate J.B. Akers, a Republican from Kanawha County and the chair of the Judiciary Committee.
For-profit organizations would be required to disclose their name, business address, telephone number, to each donor and customer, along with a disclosure statement that this is not a charity. Donations here are for support a for-profit business. The bill requires each class of thrift operator to provide this information in drop boxes, along with a notice at the drop box or the place of the in-person donations, or along with a written notification for in-person deliveries. This bill also provides the Secretary of State with the power to enforce the requirements, along with making knowing violations of the new code section a misdemeanor with a first offense of minimum $100 fine.
Delegate Brandon Steele, a Republican from Raleigh County, said the law goes against entrepreneurialism and adds unnecessary red tape to thrift resellers.
West Virginia is open for business unless you're trying to make a profit. West Virginia is open for business unless you're trying to make a profit. What does this bill seek to do? Is to let people know if they're donating something or giving something away. I think rather than use the term donating, I would say giving away something. Giving away something that you don't have value in. And you're giving it to someone that does have value.
Steele said a bill like this puts extra burdens on people who are trying to get by in the state.
This right here is a travesty. And it takes away from the hard-working West Virginians, as our former governor would say, the Toby and Ediths that are working out of the back of a truck trying to put some rhubarb on the table for their kids to eat at the end of the day. Vote this bill down right now and get rid of this travesty.
Delegate Sean Hornbuckle, a Democrat from Cabell County, asked Akers what current problem the bill seeks to address.
I note this new deliberative process, we have the opportunity to try to figure out what issue that we're trying to solve. And what would that be here?
Akers said the problem is if someone is misled, and further so if they try to claim a charitable tax deduction off of the donation.
That there are for-profit businesses that pass themselves off essentially as nonprofit thrift operators, and that they will do things such as take in donations that the donor believes is going to a charitable cause, Some donors, it was reported by testimony, would then believe that they made a charitable donation that they could put on their tax return. They were prohibited from doing so once they found out that the entity who took in their donation was actually a for-profit business.
The bill was passed. Notably, many Republicans and Democrats voted against the bill.
The Senate had a lively day today, passing 10 bills on issues ranging from optometry to carbon sequestration. As Chris Schultz reports, 2 of those bills deal with the well-being of students in the state schools.
For the past several years, Senator Mike Woelfel, a Democrat from Cabell County, has sponsored Senate Bill 155, establishing the Summer Feeding for All program. He says certain counties have been able to successfully feed students when school isn't in session, but childhood hunger remains a problem across the state.
Unfortunately, around the state, there are still pockets of poverty where children are hungry in the summer. So this will identify those pockets and make sure that we can get food to those children.
According to the Food Research and Action Center, a nonprofit organization that works to end hunger and improve health outcomes for people in poverty, only 15% of children who receive a free or reduced price lunch nationally during the 2022-2023 school year received a summer lunch. The West Virginia Department of Education estimates that close to 70% of the state's school-age children qualify for free or reduced price meals. Woelfel says his bill doesn't require counties to establish summer feeding programs or even engage with existing programs like the federal Summer Food Service Program.
And it doesn't impose any unfunded cost on the county boards of education. This is just to find a way to identify the kids that are hungry and let social services, the churches, the communities can feed them. But if we don't know who they are, they're going to be hungry in the summer.
The bill has found success in the Senate, passing in both 2023 and 2024, but never in the House of Delegates. Despite its many failed attempts, Woelfel says he is happy to see it run again this year and hopes the House will advance it as well. But he did not leave things to chance, and Monday Woelfel urged his Republican colleagues to apply some pressure in the lower chamber.
This bill did not get taken up in the House last year, if you can imagine that. So kids just continued to suffer from hunger over the summer. So if those in the majority party feel so inclined, please reach out across the hallway and try to encourage folks in the House to stand up for these hungry kids.
For the past several years, legislators have heard from concerned citizens and educators about the rise in violent behavior in younger and younger students. Last week, the House of Delegates passed House Bill 2515, which would give teachers from kindergarten to grade 6 the ability to remove students from their classroom for extreme disciplinary issues. Monday, the Senate passed Senate Bill 199, their own version of elementary school discipline. Senate Education Chair Senator Amy Grady, a Republican from Mason County, presented a similar bill last year and said in committee that she put significant effort this year to ensure Senate Bill 199 provided the best outcomes for students. That includes requiring that students removed from their classrooms for disciplinary issues work with mental health professionals.
The school counselor, social worker, psychologist, or behavior interventionist is required to establish a behavior plan for the student. The behavior plan is required to be followed for a period of 2 weeks. After that, a reevaluation of the student's behavior is to be conducted, and if adequate progress is being made, the behavior plan is to continue.
Requirements in both the House and Senate versions of the bill that students be placed in alternative education settings have raised concerns from lawmakers and school administrators about cost. Only 13 such programs exist in the state at this time, and many more would need to be established to comply if the law were passed. The 2 discipline bills will now need to clear the legislative process again in the opposing chambers and be reconciled before being able to find their way to the governor's desk for signature. For the Legislature Today, I'm Chris Schultz.
The Senate passed a bill that could broadly expand the practice of optometry in this state. However, there were disagreements about how much those practices could be expanded.
Optometrists examine, diagnose, and treat patients' eyes. Ophthalmologists perform medical and surgical treatments for eye conditions. Senate Bill 565 would allow optometrists, the eye doctors, to perform some surgeries that currently only ophthalmologists or eye surgeons are permitted to do, like laser eye surgery. Senator Eric Tarr, a Republican from Putnam County, says the bill goes way beyond laser eye surgery. He says the bill opens up the scope of practice for optometrists so widely that anything they receive training to do, they can do.
There's a section on page 2, and this is my biggest concern with this bill, is on page 2 it just says that if it's taught in a school, not that that individual was taught. And so it expands it way beyond what just that individual could be taught.
Senator Laura Chapman, a Republican from Ohio County and the Senate Health Committee chair, said that this is a non-issue.
These boards exist to protect the public, so they're not going to approve procedures that their members are not taught on, are not trained on, so I don't believe that that's an issue.
But Tarr says the bill takes power away from the board to not only approve what optometrists can do, but it also takes disciplinary power away from the board.
If a school somewhere out in California teaches a program, they put it in there for an hour, and I have evidence that they put it in there for a vendor coming in for an hour's instruction. So now that's in my scope of practice, so I'm going to give it a whim, which is kind of what we were dealing with this previous amendment yesterday that got corrected. So I'm going to give it a whim, and I injure somebody. And I come before the Board of Optometry, and they say, you were practicing something that you shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to say, wait a minute, this was taught, University of California or wherever, it's within our scope of practice. I absolutely can. It's right there in law. That attorney has strong standing for that individual not to be disciplined for hurting individuals in West Virginia.
Chapman pushed back and said there are more opportunities ahead of the legislature to work on this bill.
We can mince words all day. I mean, there was not an amendment on this. The other side of the building has to actually approve this as well, and so if there's an issue, they can fix it over there.
On Thursday, the full Senate had the one and possibly only chance to change the bill. One amendment that could have addressed some of the issues Tarr raised was voted down. Another amendment that put minimum requirements on training for laser eye surgery narrowly passed. Tarr said that amendment fixed the laser part of the bill, but there are still fundamental issues with the way the bill is currently worded.
The problem is the bill left in language after coming out of second reading that permitted pretty much anything to go in that scope of practice if somebody can argue that it was taught in some school that was accredited in the country.
The bill passed 22-11, and all 11 no votes were Republicans.
Earlier today, health reporter Emily Rice sat down with the state's new Secretary of the Department of Human Services, Alex Mayer, to discuss the future of child welfare in the state, with more than 6,000 kids in its custody.
Hi, my name is Emily Rice. I'm the health reporter for West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Today I'm joined by Secretary Alex Mayer of the Department of Human Services. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And could you just introduce yourself a little bit? You're our incoming, you've been here a while, but we're still kind of writing incoming secretary. Could you tell us where you're from?
Yep, so I'm coming from South Dakota. Okay. I was the Chief of Children and Family Services there. I oversaw our economic assistance programs, which is, SNAP, TANF, LEAP, child care, Medicaid eligibility. I oversaw child support and then also our child welfare program or child protection services in South Dakota. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of experience. So, child welfare is I would say contentious is an easy word for what it is in West Virginia.
Sure.
But you want to focus on the future and your future plans. Mm-hmm. I would be, remiss without mentioning the ruling that we had briefly talked about that, Judge Goodwin in the Fourth Circuit, there's a 2019 class action lawsuit against the state and the foster care system that you were kind of grandfathered into. And then Judge Goodwin ruled at the same time that you were testifying in court that lawsuit was null and void essentially in that court, and that it was the responsibility of the state. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to give you a chance to just say, what are the state's plans when it comes to that ruling? I know, again, you weren't around, but the judge has said it's the state's job. What's the state's response to that?
Yeah, well, I would say, right when I came into the state, I recognized that's just on us to fix, right, as the state agency that oversees that program. And so that's why right when I came into this role, we started executing and trying to figure that stuff out. So quickly set up meetings with providers to just understand what's going on here, sitting down with judges and finding out what's going on in West Virginia, and sitting down with staff, right? I mean, I think throughout the entire system, what I've always really tried to focus on is collaborating with everyone involved in the system. Because those are the folks that are going to know the issues and are going to know the problems and help us come up with solutions that are going to fix those issues, right? So, we recognize it as something that we're going to have to work diligently to fix. But I think what you're already seeing is that momentum in doing so. So, again, from whether it be external stakeholder engagement to figure out out-of-state placement issues, to whether it's internal problems like accountability and standardization and, system or programmatic systems in place to create a practice model that we can execute our work in an effective and efficient way that really is comprehensive, right? I mean, all those different things that we're trying to implement really, I think, show just how in line we are with Judge Goodwin's order and decision in determining that it is the state's responsibility. But I think, since being here, we've really taken that full charge, aside from it just even being talked about by Judge Goodwin. But I think inherently we at the department see it as our duty to try and figure out how to fix this.
Okay. And so you mentioned local judges. Are you speaking with, local community stakeholders as well, that, are CPS workers that are on the ground that are dealing with these cases, that are overloaded with cases? What did you hear from them once you got on the ground here in the state?
Yeah, so, sitting down and talking with various staff, I think what we're realizing that there's a lot of opportunity for support that they could use, right? There's a large backlog in vacancies, which we've been able to really rectify and get back on order after discussing those issues with Judge Sweeney and some of the staff in that area. So, just in the 3 weeks that we've been working to rectify that issue, we've got 65 candidates selected. So, putting the right support in place to help take that burden off staff in the field and really leveraging our human resources team has really allowed us to exponentially ramp up those efforts to ensure that we're getting the right staff in place. Now, obviously, it takes time to train staff, but I think first and foremost, we need to identify, are we even able to get the people that we need to do this job? And I think we're starting to see that people are wanting to do this job. It's just we need to be a better or do a better job of getting out there and engaging with those folks that they can come onto the registers and we can get those folks hired. And then in terms of just more comprehensive stakeholder engagement, our team has developed a strategy where shortly we'll be going out and doing listening sessions around the state with various stakeholders. And we'll start having conversations with community partners, delegates, senators, judges, prosecutors. All different facets of the system, foster families, right? Those that interface with that system to kind of get insight from them on, what are the challenges you're facing? And I think one thing I've come to appreciate in my conversations with various folks is those dynamics that change across the state, right? So you have things that are happening in Huntington that may not look like may not be happening the same way in Elkins, or they may not be happening the same way in Wheeling, or there might be different challenges, right? So, what I found was really important is that we do a good job of getting out to those different areas to really understand, what are the statewide issues that everyone's challenged with, but then what are those, regional or specifically focused area issues that we can maybe put some more effort and more targeted efforts towards resolving or getting some of the solutions in place, or having maybe more targeted conversations with particular groups in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's maybe conjecture, but just when you look at the data and the map, focusing on a county by county approach. We're such a small state, but we are so diverse and varied in between counties. We have, I grew up in Putnam County. Kanawha County, this area is so much more different than, the southern coalfields. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is the approach has to be different.
Yeah, and I think there's, systematic things across the state that we can implement and that will make an impact regardless of location. But there are nuances, and then just, I think, to be respectful of where those nuances might lie and what may need to change as a result of that. I think we just want to be mindful in approach that there may need to be some alterations to certain approaches depending on those locations, whether it be because of resources and availability and access to different things such as transportation or childcare, right? I think all these different pieces play into how we're going to implement a solution that'll be impactful for that area. So yes, while we want to try and be as comprehensive in a statewide approach as possible, yeah, we're going to recognize that we're going to have to tailor our approach because of those kind of regional or locale type specific problems.
And this kind of leads right into the CPS compensation conversation. CPS workers being compensated differently in different counties. I wanted to touch back on something you mentioned with training for CPS workers. That is a concern or a complaint that we've heard from previous CPS workers is that they don't feel like they were properly equipped. Can you tell us just a little bit about the training that any prospective CPS workers could actually kind of look forward to having these tools in their toolkit?
Yeah, so I actually was meeting with our supervisory group last week. They had a meeting where we brought all the leaders into the office to have a conversation about just various trainings and different things going on. But I think just good to put people in the same room together and just breathe the same oxygen so they can just have those conversations that you really don't get through virtual conversations. But in that conversation with them, what I talked about is those things that we're going to start looking at to provide better training. We don't have a well-established practice model here in the state. And that's an important piece when you talk about CPS work, very important when you talk about training, right? So really wanting to start giving staff the tools they need to be effective in that work that they're doing every day. And so we've already started having conversations about what that practice model change might look like and how we can begin to modernize the work that we do and provide training to staff that's more comprehensive, more effective. But I think coupled with that is the need to ensure that our supervisory staff and team are being mentors and coaching and finding that time in their day to be able to give that feedback and constructive criticism to those staff as they work through these issues, right? We need to make sure that our supervisors are making themselves available as much as possible. And I think that comes with the ability to get more staff on, reducing the burden on supervisors to either work a case or work a caseload. And again, I think just continue to work with them to see where we can make some efforts to improve the work that we're doing every day. But training is a real serious area that we're taking a hard look at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One more thing that you did mention was the something about communication within the department and with, CPS workers with the foster care system. There's different information gateways that have been put into place throughout the years. A lot of people are kind of tired of hearing, we're planning this, we're strategizing this. What can you tell West Virginia families that are concerned about foster care, about the fixes that you and your administration and your staff is ready to put into place for those kind of miscommunications? I feel like a lot of this conversation is kind of placing a foundation or a safety net under that. Forgive me if I'm leading. But yeah, if you could kind of speak to that a little bit, what West Virginia families should expect.
Yeah, what I can tell you is, we're really going back to the foundational pieces of the work that we do, right? When we talk about accountability, when we talk about discipline, when we talk about training, when we talk about general work across the agency, those are very foundational pieces that are only going to build on the other things that we're putting in place. What was taught to me a long time ago is that people are policy, right? You can have the best systems and the best policies and the most comprehensive things in place, but if you don't have the right people doing that work and they're not well trained to do that work, then much of that other stuff kind of falls by the wayside. So we're really focusing on that training. And I think, too, that goes to just supervisory training and those types of things that I've been working with our HR team on to just get well-established foundational supervisor training in place so that our supervisors are well-trained. And then that will allow them to be more effective in their role as they oversee and hold staff accountable into the work that they're doing. And it just kind of builds on itself, right? So, in terms of execution on the overall effort in improving child welfare in West Virginia, I think we're just kind of at the starting point in that way, right? But I think what you'll see is, and we've already started doing, is really getting those pieces in place to start having those conversations to find out what that strategy is, right? I'm not coming in here and saying that I know how to fix it, right? What I think I am doing is getting the right people around the table to figure out how we're going to work together to figure out what the issues are and what those solutions are to begin fixing those issues. So I think we've started to get the right people in place. After having the opportunity to discuss these with Judge Akers and her putting the monitor in place, right? I've already been able to work with Cindy Largett Hill, been able to have conversations with Keith Hoover also over at the judicial area. So, looking forward to continuing that work, but it's a system problem where we really need to bring every partner within that system together to have those conversations to start making some change.
And with our remaining time here, that was one question I wanted to ask about that monitor. I'm not sure, again, this is the past, but we've had a foster care ombudsman in place that was supposed to be an unbiased monitor of sorts. How is that going to work separate or differently from the ombudsman role, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that, when I first came into this role, I had a meeting with the ombudsman, and we've set up regular biweekly meetings now to figure out where those areas of improvement and those areas of need are. So I think the dynamic here is that the ombudsman is going to be really, really critical in our continued identification of where there's area of challenge and whether those things that we're putting in place are creating change. And I think the monitor, on the other hand, are going to be really integral members to the work and figuring out and working through those solutions that we'll be implementing. So I think it'll be complementing one another, but yeah, obviously very distinct roles where the ombudsman is providing more of that insight into the change that's created, whereas the monitor is going to be a part of that change.
Interesting. Really fascinating. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I could talk about foster care all day.
Sure.
But thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate your time here on the Legislature Today. I'm Emily Rice. I've been joined here by Secretary Alex Mayer, the Department of Human Services on. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the Department of Human Services Secretary Alex Mayer speaking with health reporter Emily Rice about issues relating to the state's foster care system. That's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Catch the Legislature Today Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. And remember, West Virginia Public Broadcasting covers the session daily in our radio news program, West Virginia Morning, and on our news site at wvpublic.org. We also broadcast the daily floor sessions of both the House and the Senate on the West Virginia channel. I'm Brianna Heaney. Good evening, and see you here again tomorrow.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu. Embassy Suites by Hilton Charleston, an all-suite hotel and conference center minutes from Yeager Airport and Capital Markets. Reservations and brasserie dining information available at hilton.com.
Solar Holler, supporting Appalachian communities and building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar energy and battery backup to homeowners, nonprofits, and businesses throughout the region. More at solarholler.com.